Please welcome the co-founder and
CEO of Travelbank,
Chung, and the partner of Row Capital Partners, Dan Ruch, in conversation with Skift Senior Research Analyst, Seth Borko.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm very excited for this panel. We have two of the smartest startup founders, I think, in the corporate travel space. We're going to talk about the future of our industry and the agility of small startups. We have Chung of Travelbank. It's an all-in-one travel expense card solutions platform. And we have Dan Ruch. He was a founder of Rocket Trip, which pioneered the idea of reward and travel savings, and recently sold the company, is now a venture capital partner at Row Capital Partners. So Duke and Dan, thank you both so much for joining us. Dan, I want to start with you because you're an investor now. And I just kind of wanted to ask you this question. Would you be looking to invest in a corporate travel startup these days in your new role?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah. Well, we got to get exciting off the bat.
You're going in heavy. I think travel's going to be the corporate travel space is going to recover. From an investment standpoint, it's probably a little radioactive from the perspective of early venture, just because there are so many unknowns in terms of how the recovery is going to happen, what it's going to look like, when it's going to happen, and all of the different sort of ramifications of that. From the perspective of venture capital, time is critical, and so I think everybody is saying it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But when is a moving target right now, and is a scary proposition from the perspective of making a bet. So I do think we'll see innovation and investment in corporate travel. I think those that are leaning into corporate travel investing right now are doing so because you can get deals at a discount.
Yeah. So Duke, I want to kind of throw this to you because I think Dan is absolutely right. There's just a ton of uncertainty in the space, and we shouldn't sugarcoat anything that's happening right now. You're in the thick of it right now. How are you responding to this crisis with your startup, and where do you see opportunity today?
Hi, Seth. Yeah, thanks for having us here. And great question. We, travel's been very tough over the last 10, 12 months since this pandemic has started. There's no question about it. I think it's hurt our entire industry very significantly. And, I think from day one, we've been an all-in-one travel expense solution, really focused on delivering this all-in-one value proposition for companies. And I think what you saw over the last 10, 12 months is that people really just refocused their efforts on shifting towards this temporary normal, focusing on controlling spend, reducing cost. We saw a lot of demand for expense management capabilities that led us to develop some card management functionalities with partners. And you're seeing that growth during this period of time, at least until travel comes back, which we're all hopeful that travel will come back and will come back stronger.
Yeah, so maybe, Duke, if I can push you on that a little bit, because I know you've been doing some really exciting things on kind of like expense. I think you even call it expense management 2.0. Does the move to hybrid and remote work, is that going to lead to opportunities for growth in business travel? Like, is this a new untapped market? And what does that look like?
I think we'll soon realize as we come out of this pandemic into the travel recovery stage and post-recovery that the world is changing. One thing we always say is that change is the only constant thing. It's always changing. This pandemic really pulled forward the roadmaps for a lot of things to happen. And I do think we are moving to a digital first work from anywhere world. And let me just caveat anywhere. When I say anywhere, most people say, Duke, I'm not going to work at home anymore. I can't do this after 12 months, right? Really work from anywhere in our view is you can work from an office. You can work from your home. You can work from Tahoe. You can work from Hawaii. When I look at our employees, more than half of our employees that were based here in the San Francisco Bay Area have left the area in the last 12 months to different places. And we're okay with that. We've seen productivity maintain and even be higher than before. So I think a lot of companies are beginning this shift. And as a result of that, I do think travel goes up as a result of this digital first work from anywhere world. Why is that? Because when your employees need to get together, you're going to have more group meetings that require travel, whether to your office or to other locations. this is going to lead to an increase in travel. This spend was not there before the pandemic because you would ask your employees to post to your office, come live nearby, and it's on your own to commute into the office every day. But as we move into this new world, I think this creates an opportunity for more travel in the new setup post-pandemic.
And Dan, I want to get you to kind of reflect on this question as well. The 500-pound gorilla in the room of is corporate travel a growing or a shrinking industry, so to speak? Certainly, one thesis has been there's new bucket of travel from the remote workers, but there's also people who say we can kind of return to a more normal as well. What's your take on all of this? You have a lot of experience here.
I think the only thing we know for sure is that nobody knows for sure how this is going to look in a couple of years' time. I think what we do know is that, and look, I look at this from the perspective of investment. And Duke, I don't. You and I haven't caught up in a while, so I don't know. And by the way, it's great to see you again.
Yes,
I don't know what your financing history, his trajectories look like, but we were in the middle of a financing right as COVID hit. And most of the smart money was pencils down because of the unknown. It was just too risky. And as we think about the road to recovery, there is one argument. Duke's absolutely right. Everybody's distributed, and we are human social creatures, and we crave being around each other. And so there will be more emphasis placed on how do we create communities. And part of creating those communities is to get us together in person. The bear case, that's the bull case, right? On a quicker path to recovery. Seth, you called it, creating a new pie. The bear case on the road to recovery for corporate travel is that the decision is not held by the traveler. The decision to travel is held by the budget owners, and the budget owners have to rationalize the expense. And so if I'm a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and I'm not talking about startup world, because by and large, the majority of the budget, if we're talking about moving big rocks, we're talking about the large organizations that are spending hundreds of millions, in fact, billions of dollars every year. And so let's talk about that. If I'm a CEO of a multinational Fortune 500, and I didn't see a significant decrease in productivity last year as a result of a slowdown or a freeze on travel, then what's the rationale for rebooting that travel budget if I don't need to spend it to produce the same returns? And so you're going to have an interesting cycle here where revenue leadership is going to argue for a rebuild of the T&E expense line item. The CFO is going to push back, and that's going to be a haggle that's going to take a couple of years to figure out, because year one, the obvious answer is let's wait and see. Let's see if we can achieve the same performance without travel. Yeah, there'll be some budget allocated to the social fabrication of our community internally, and people are going to travel, but it's not the big, heavy, meaty sales budgets, which is the main driver of travel expense inside a large organization. So it's really talking about how do we rebuild that. And I think what's going to happen is year one, it's going to be wait and see. Year two, you may start losing deals to competition that is traveling. And so the CRO gets a little bit more budget. Year three, a little bit more budget. And I do see a world to a full recovery. And in fact, the sort of getting back on track to what we were talking about, was it $1.4 trillion by 25 or whatever it was? I think that's pushed out 3 or 4 years, but I think you get there eventually. There is a road to recovery that requires gatekeepers and budget owners to approve the spend over time. And so that's what's going to slow us down, at least in the near term.
I think that sounds reasonable. It's a realistic approach. I think maybe one of the things we can talk about then is that how do we, the corporate travel buyers that you're talking about, how do you help them find budget? And how do you help them find innovation? How do you make inroads, especially as, I'm going to maybe throw this to you, Duke, especially as a startup, how do you make inroads? We asked a poll to our audience in terms of what's most important for a team. I don't know if that's ready right now. And we kind of said, is it the customer support? Is that most important? Is it technology? Is that most important? Or is it actual travel supply? And shockingly, few people said it's really not about travel supply. And people are kind of saying, has a lot to do with technology. Would you agree with that, Duke? Is technology the key to making inroads to those corporate travel buyers? And how do you think about making inroads?
I think that's right. It's great to see that data that you shared. I haven't seen that until you shared it now.
Live data, it's happening as we speak.
It's real time. I'm very impressed. Yeah, and I think it's good validation. I think it's absolutely right. I think when we started this business a little over 4 years ago, our thesis was that, technology would be the driver and the key differentiator for this industry, for travel, expense, and card management payments. And I think what you saw during the pandemic was really a pull forward effect of about 2 to 3 years. You saw this all across other verticals as well. For example, if you're used to going to the restaurant, and now you wanted to eat during the last 10, 12 months, what are you doing? You're probably on DoorDash or Uber Eats. Learn how to use these technologies to do it yourself, to order and to deliver to your house. If you're not ordering groceries to your house to cook, you're seeing this in commerce. You typically go to the malls, but all the malls were shut down. So if you need to buy something for the holidays and you were very against e-commerce for whatever reason, what did you do during the pandemic? You learned how to use these technologies, these e-commerce self-service technologies. And what we saw was a boom in these sectors. And I think in travel and expense management, we've seen this. We will see the same thing that's happening, which is as a result of new habits that are formed, people are going to lean even more into technologies as the key differentiator. People now are able to do things on their own, to book their own travel on the desktop, to book their own travel on mobile, to do their own expense reports. I mean, one of the reasons expense management has really boomed over the last 12 months is this remote work setup. Everybody's at home. Everybody's an expense user today because a lot of the expenses that were happening were taken care of by the company originally when you're in the office. For example, your internet access. In the Bay Area, we like to offer food to our employees and fitness benefits and wellness benefits. Company will pay for all that. You just sign up for it. But now in this remote work setup, you're seeing that a lot of this spend is being democratized now down to the employee level. So if I'm an employee who've never used an expense system before because I'm not part of the sales team, I'm not part of the marketing teams, I'm not an executive in the company, you're seeing that everybody's having to learn how to use these technologies. And I think technology will continue to become the number one differentiator moving forward because we're moving into a new era, a modern era, where users, the workforce is sophisticated around technology. They're going to look to technology first to see what capabilities you bring to the table. Is it modern? Is it easy to get up and running? Is the pricing model in line? All of these things become more important attributes, we believe. And I think the pandemic really will show that it pulled it forward about 2 to 3 years.
Duke, yeah, let me I guess follow up on that point, which is that we're saying technology is going to be important, but I think there can be historically having many roadblocks to innovation. So maybe either of you, Dan, maybe if you want to jump in, like, what do you think are roadblocks to innovation in space, and how do we overcome them? And I think either of you can answer. Yeah.
I think before we get there, this is a question for Duke, because I have a perspective on it, but you're in the space and deeper into it than I am. But I totally agree with you, right? Technology is going to eat the world, absolutely. And this forced and I don't believe COVID was a change agent more than it was an accelerant, and that's what you called it as well. That it brought forward a couple of years everything that we're doing, including technologies that may potentially prevent travel in the first place. So this video conferencing is accelerated 5 years in 6 months, right? Just because of the requirement of it. So the question is, does that present a headwind for getting back on a plane? Or do you think that in a return to normal world, we stop using these video conferencing solutions and only use them as sort of supplemental requirements when we cannot travel?
Yeah. Duke, yeah, do you have thoughts on that?
No, Seth, you go first. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I'll let Dan do my job. For me, I'm happy to outsource. I happen to agree with you. I think it's an interesting question about how much of it is really new demand versus, I think it's a broader, more expanded view of the market. Duke.
I think Dan, on your question, I think it's a good point. I think now we're all used to Zoom and Microsoft Teams type of technologies. I think it does replace a tier of travel that we previously had. Maybe I call it tier 1 meetings. The meet and greets, you're going to do that. Maybe even some of the tier 2 meetings, right? But I think ultimately there is going to be a demand to still meet with people. I think those relationships that are built in person still are most meaningful. I think conference travel, which as we all represent the bulk of business travel, that comes back. Why? Because look, I think adults just need some time to go to these conferences to learn or to interact with other people or do other things, right? I think to, just to have some balance with their everyday lives where, what we've experienced in the last 12 months was this combination of work life being combined at home. Some people like it, but I think most people prefer a separation after going through this and a state in which you can have different activities. So I do think that comes back in a big way. And by the way, since we serve mostly small businesses, our small business segment of customers, the travel has returned. Our levels have already returned, exceeded March 2020 numbers in our small business segment. And we saw small businesses was the last to trail off when the pandemic started. It started with large companies because of the borders closing. Of course, remote work, put a damper into the mid-market. Small business was still traveling. I think what you're seeing now is in our small business segment, it's the reverse. It's the last in, first out. Small businesses are traveling again. They're exceeding March 2020 levels already in our business. And I think they mirror most of the consumer travel right now, the leisure travel side, which the vaccines are making a significant impact. People are traveling again. And small business owners, they're very much like consumers. They're next in line. You're seeing that. I think it's very promising for those that are selling into or offering services in mid-market and enterprise. I think it's just a matter of time before we get back.
And Duke, in other areas of opportunity, one of the, I think it's interesting for you is you've been doing some fintech integrations as well. That's a new angle in terms of a way to recoup some, maybe a new way to enter other underserved markets, right? Tell us a bit about that as well, because I think that's an interesting angle that you're pursuing there.
Yeah, I think, and I think this ties into your roadmap block question quite a bit as well. I think where Travelbank sits, we provide an all-in-one travel expense and payments. We call it card solution, but really it's a payment solution that we can connect with any virtual card, any plastic card, any bank issuer out there. So we're not a bank issuer. I think a lot of our competitors have moved into this to become a bank issuer to take advantage of the interchange, but we're not. We don't make money on interchange. We basically provide a solution that allows a company to hook in any credit card, whether it's a U.S. bank card, American Express card, Wells Fargo card. Some of our clients have 5 different cards. They all connected to our system, and we can pull all the data in and issue virtual cards from our system. So, we've been in this business. We actually serve 3 different communities as a result of that. We're in the travel space, with I think a lot of the audience here. We're in the expense business, so we work with the expense community, and now we're working with the banking industry, right, for payments. So we're in 3 different areas, and I think one of the opportunities we see is that we see the problems that each of these communities face. So we sit in a very unique role. Sometimes one of the communities might have something cool they created. I'll give you a good example of that problem that they solved. They thought they were solving a problem for themselves, but actually solved the problem for another one of the communities. And I'll share an example. We worked with US Bank on developing a new technology that can bring in their virtual card technology. And I could issue a virtual card, a US Bank virtual card. It's called an instant card from the Travelbank system. You could assign it to an employee. I could say, Seth, I'll send you $8,000 and make it expire in 2 weeks. You're going to get it right away in your email, and you're going to be able to log into Travelbank, get access to your 16-digit US Bank instant card number. But you can also link it to your mobile wallet. You can add it to your iPhone, to your Google. Instantly. They have a green pad technology. There's no waiting period. You can instantly use it. So for offline, you can travel. And
I just wanted to. It's really, I think, fascinating. I'm sorry. I just want to. We're a little tight on time, and I did want a few more questions in. But I think your point broadly is a really good one. That there are other underserved markets, small medium enterprises, this fintech space, this integration with travel, and I want to throw a question to you, Dan, kind of on opportunities, which is sort of what Duke was talking about with fintech. I love your previous company's focus on incentives and kind of behavioral economics. What behaviors do you think need to be incentivized or disincentivized today in terms of if you were going to think about it that way?
I mean, I think first of all, on the topic of going broader, it makes perfect sense, Duke. Your strategy using TripActions do the same thing, getting into finance and lending and payments because that's where opportunity is when nobody's traveling, right? So it makes perfect sense. And I do see these worlds gelling together, the travel and expense sides of the houses. In terms of what we did specifically in Rocket Trip, I mean, in a world where people are traveling with any degree of regularity, they're spending money, and when they're spending money, there's a misalignment of potential misalignment of interests, right? Employees want freedom and flexibility, companies want cost containment and control, and therein lies the rub and the reason that Rocket Trip exists in the first place. I don't necessarily think that changes at all with respect to life in a post-COVID world, other than maybe how do we want our employees to behave, and are they willing to behave that way if we ask them to? If they're not willing to behave that way, if we ask them to, then we've got options. We can either enforce it through policy, or we can reward it through incentives. And you're seeing areas of sort of that friction point with respect to travel policy. We can't force employees to fly coach because we have to be competitive in the market. So over 6 hours, we let them fly business class. We ask them to fly coach, but we can't force it, but we can't motivate it. That's where incentives come in. Incentives, you can make your employees stand on one foot if you want them to. It's just a question of how much you are willing to pay them to offset the cost of what they think they are giving up. It's not about what you think they're giving up. It's all about sort of, I will act in my own best interest. This question of, will you make it worth my while? And that's a relatively sort of capitalistic point of view, but it works. Human beings will respond to financial incentives in very predictable ways anywhere you drop the carrot in front of them.
And so I really like that way of thinking. We're going to switch over to audience questions, but it is one about behavior, about traveler behavior. It's a question about, what's your view on the fact that there may be less travel due to safety restrictions that will be included in organizational policies? And if I could rephrase a little bit, I wonder if we could talk a bit about how, just broadly, how safety and duty of care comes into your world now, and how that's going to change your models. Maybe we'll throw it to you, Duke, and we can also get your thoughts on that, Dan, too.
Yeah, I think it's first and foremost, it's the number one thing that every travel manager is now tasked with is as they restart their travel programs, how are they thinking about restarting this with all of the new procedures and policies and the communications required to ensure that their employees are going to be traveling in a very safe way. A lot of this information, of course, is being provided to us by the airlines, guidelines by the FAA as we return to travel. There's a lot more federal regulations that are now in place that we pass along the communications and pre-trip, during trip, and after trip, right? In case something happens, and be able to track employees where they are around the world gives visibility to the travel managers in case something does happen. They're able to reach out to them, know where they are, look at their itineraries. But I think most importantly, also for the agents that we serve, they also have access as really being a part of the client's team to make sure that their employees are traveling safely and watching over them 24/7. So it is first and foremost the most important thing. I think if we've seen anything, the approval processes have become more strict. Every single trip needs an approval. We've seen that in the last 10 months, 12 months. I think that starts to relax a little bit. I do see that in the coming quarters for some segments of the market as this opens up. And I think over time, as we move up into the mid-market enterprise in the second half of this year, that you'll continue to see that behavior of these approval restrictions kind of lift.
And Dan, I want to give you a chance. Sorry, we're like at the time. I want to give you a chance to respond to that as well, Dan.
I think it's. I mean, I think it's exactly what I was talking about. It's another risk item. It's another unknown. It's another headwind for sure. But on this one, we've got heuristic. We've got proxies, right? You had H1N1. You had 9/11. You had every pandemic in history we've recovered from. So unless this one and the new variants present a widely different picture than what we're seeing today, I think this is a relatively near-term problem. I think we learn how to live with COVID like we've learned how to live with the flu, and people get back on airplanes. It may take 18 months before we're able to fully relax and understand the magnitude of the safety implications. But so chalk this up to, just like you have to fight for budget year over year to get travel budgets increased, you have to fight through the safety and security issues, and it'll take a little longer, but eventually I think we get there.
Does it even maybe help TMCs? Dan, what do you think? Maybe.
Help the relevance of TMCs?
Yeah,
I think it helps the relevance of, look, to your question about sort of friction in innovation in this space in corporate travel, having lived through it for 8 years, and I can probably be more honest and straightforward than Duke can because he's still in it. There's a huge amount of money invested in maintaining a status quo in corporate travel, and so that is number one. Number two, is there's a huge inertia point where a key decision maker, the travel manager, who at times can be very innovative and very, very forward thinking, typically doesn't hold budget to buy anything. They have to get approval from higher ups, and the higher ups think of T&E as a fringe part of their program that is important, but it's not the most important thing. And so how do we empower travel managers with budget to have autonomy to make these kinds of decisions to accelerate the momentum in the space? I think that's probably the single biggest factor impacting the industry's ability to innovate inside of itself.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Duke. We're going to wrap up there on time. A really fascinating conversations, lots of challenges, lots of opportunities, lots of tech. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
See you, Duke.
Thank you, Dan.